Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Nabin Park, and I'm a co-founder and co-director of Prideful. To briefly describe myself in audio, I am a non-binary East Asian person in my 20s. I have brown eyes and long hair that's a mix of neon yellow and neon green, which I let down. I'm wearing a dark blue indigo dress and sitting on a yellow couch in front of a white wall. I accept all and any pronouns, including she, they, he, and ze. Welcome to the virtual panel celebrating the QTPOC stories and filmmaking. This event is an opening program for the 2021 Prideful series. Prideful is a film screening series by and for queer and trans people of color, or QTPOC. We strive to provide an open, safe space for the QTPOC community, and especially for those who are filmmakers, artists, and arts lovers. The 2021 Prideful series includes tonight's panel talk and 10 more films and Q&As, all available virtually. The theme of this year's series is Stories of Queer Diasporas, The Journey in Search of Blank. The films and events bring a timely yet universal conversation about migration, immigration, and alienation in queer diasporas. Right now, Peer Kids is available for streaming, and we have a virtual live Q&A scheduled this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. To get tickets and more information, please check out our socials at Prideful Film with double L's, or our website, prideful.org, also with double L's. Before we start, I'd like to thank everyone who made this program possible. I'd like to first thank my colleagues, Juhi Oh and Isaiah Alexander, who have been working so hard to program and execute this year's series. For anyone who's watching it virtually, I invite you to join me and give a round of applause to Juhi and Isaiah. Also, I'd like to thank Jack Kellner for captioning today's event. I'd like to thank our partners who have supported us in so many ways. Thank you to $3 Biz Cinema, Encopia, DCTV, API Rainbow Parents of PFLAG NYC, QuackMap, Third World Newsreel, Creatively Speaking, Pride Asia, and Aglyph. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of our generous individual donors. Thank you all for making this happen. Tonight, we'll discuss what it takes to filmmaking and telling our own stories as queer and trans people of color. Three filmmakers, Madeleine Lim, Comas, and Mary Galloway, will join us. If you have any questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A box instead of the chat box. You can also choose to verbally speak by clicking the raise your hand button and wait until Isaiah gives you an access to turn on your video and speak. While I'll be checking the Q&A box throughout the event and asking any relevant questions as they come in, please note that there is a designated time for questions from the audience at the end. Please also note that this event is being recorded and will be shared with the public later. If you have any questions about the programs or are having technical issues, please ask them in the Q&A box as well, and Juhi or Isaiah will answer them. I'd like to start by asking everyone to briefly introduce themselves. Madeleine, Lay, Mary, can you please go around and introduce yourself? And I invite you to start by describing yourselves and your background using your own words. Madeleine, you can go first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Madeleine Lim, and I am an Asian woman with short hair, and I am sitting in front of a white-ish wall. Yes, that's my brief description. Thank you.
Lay, do you want to go next?
Yes, sure. My name is Comas. I'm a Black, non-binary person, short curly hair, brown eyes. I'm wearing glasses and a black shirt, and I have a white background.
I guess that's my cue. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Galloway. I am a cis, female, queer, Indigenous, as well as mixed settler descent filmmaker, writer, director, actor. I am fairly light-skinned, slightly tanned. I have my hair pulled back in a little twisty clip, and I have a gray sweater on with a beige shirt underneath, and I have a kind of sky blue backdrop.
Thank you. I think I'll open up with same question for everyone. How did you get started in filmmaking? Anyone can speak.
Sure, I'll go first. I got started in filmmaking actually as an actor, and I went to an acting school in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I fell in love with acting. And then when I graduated, I realized there was a lot of scarcity around Indigenous, queer, female-led stories, and that this was a area in which I have lived experience, and I would love to tell these stories and center my communities in stories. So then I started to write, and then fell in love with writing, and then realized I had a strong vision for my writing, and so that's how I began directing, and now I try to do all three.
That is awesome. And I know, Madeleine, you've been in the field for how many years? 25 years? How did you get started?
Sure, it's been a while. I actually remember being, I think I was 14, I think I was 15 years old, and I'm originally from Singapore. And I attended an all-girls school, and I was having this argument with my girlfriend at that time, and she was a year younger. And you know, when you're 15, you know, arguments are very dramatic. So anyhow, I was having this very dramatic argument with my girlfriend, and then I remember popping out of that argument and thinking, hey, this might make an interesting film one day. And then I popped back to my argument. So that was the first moment, I think, for me of like, you know, wanting to create films that told my story or something that was similar. And that was, when was that? That was in the 70s in Singapore. And there was definitely very little queer representation of any kind because, you know, the government censored all of it. So once I left Singapore, I was 23 and I came to the United States. That was when I started to take classes and as well as volunteer at Cable Access in San Francisco. And that was how I got started, was just, you know, started getting the skills under my belt. And eventually when I turned 30, it was my Saturn return. That was, you know, that was when it was like, okay, am I going to, you know, continue with part-time night classes? Am I going to, you know, take this seriously? So that was when I quit my job and enrolled at San Francisco State University in the film program full-time. And that was the beginning of the end.
Wow, that's very impressive. And I think your anecdote really shares like how much you are like a born artist, that you just thought about filmmaking, even in your argument with your girlfriend back then. Lei, how about you? How did you get started in filmmaking?
I actually was in school in Dominican Republic for my undergrad, and I was studying at the time advertisement because my mom was like insisted in me having something that is not so like half a career and something that will like give me money, right? I wanted initially to study photography, but because they didn't have like a bachelor program, my mom was like, no, you need to get something that is a bachelor. So I enrolled in advertisement. And then while I was doing advertisement, I came across a photography class. I took that photography class and find out that they actually have a bachelor program for filmmaking. And I was like, well, that's pretty close to photography. I took a class in critical theory for film. and I watched a movie at the Cinema Paradiso, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And that was it. Like that was when everything started. I got involved in filmmaking, and now we're here.
That's awesome. And I think that naturally, ask myself to have this question, because you're a sound mixer and you started as a photographer. That's exciting. How did you get into sound mixing?
So I'll fast forward when I came here. I moved to New York 9 years ago, and I was enrolled in a I was enrolled in a program for getting my associate degree, and there was like not many people doing sound in the play at the moment in there, especially not people that look like me. And a friend of mine introduced me to what was sound, and he was the only person that did sound at the moment. And he was like, "Do you like this? Would you like to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like, it's pretty nice. I found a niche where I knew I wanted to be on set. I didn't want to be a director. Like I didn't want to be like a director of photography either. So I found sound, and I fell in love with it the more I did it. And yeah, that's like now it's my trade.
That's awesome. And I think this is that also brings an important question for anyone who's going to be watching this live or later, that, want to be in filmmaking or film industry. That's a great reminder for everyone that there are just more than just director, there's like so many other opportunities for ourselves. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think my next question is, you three of you all have very different experience and very different backgrounds. What were some challenges you faced as you were working in the film industry? And also, what were some of the achievements that you've had in film industry? Anyone can go first.
We're all so polite. We're like, you go first. I went first last time. Someone else go first.
You can still go first, Mary.
Okay, I'll go. I would say one of the biggest challenges for me is probably just getting the opportunities that I really want and hope for. Because as an actor, you're at the mercy of casting directors bringing you into the room, and before that, you're even at the mercy of your agent and them submitting you for roles and getting you the auditions for roles. So you're very powerless as an actor, I feel like, and just like getting started, it just eats away your soul every audition you get and don't book, and it's really hard to keep going when you keep getting rejected and like you are the product. So it's not like they're rejecting some other thing that you're selling, it's literally you. And so it's that was one of the biggest challenges. And then once I got into writing and directing, and then I was casting my own projects, I realized, oh, it's really not about the actor, it's more about the role and who's right for the role. And like, if you're just not right for the role, you're just not right for the role. And you could be the best actor, but if you don't look the part or feel the part to the director, you're not going to get cast. So like learning that was very important for my self-esteem as an actor. And then writing and directing, the biggest challenges I find are finding the right people to align with and to get funding from, and being able to make your stories come to life, and to do so with like a reasonable amount of money, to not ask people to work for free. And so that's sort of an ongoing challenge that I feel like it's never going to be enough money when you make a film or series. And and the other part of your question was like some triumphs. Okay, one of the like the first things that comes to mind is when I was living in LA, I lived there for 2 years, and I was just like grinding so hard, day in, day out, bartending and like just trying to get in rooms to audition. And then I got news that I was chosen as one of the 10 like Canadian filmmakers making an impact on Hollywood. And I was in the Hollywood Reporter's like magazine and their article, and just like walking to a magazine stand in Hollywood and seeing the Hollywood sign, and then my name and my face and my story and the Hollywood Reporters magazine is just, it was such a like dream come true. And I was like, oh my gosh, like all this grinding, like it's not for nothing. I'm making moves. They said they think I'm making an impact on Hollywood. That's great. So that was one of the highlights so far.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so amazing to hear, because you've been wearing different hats in the industry. It's exciting to hear, there are like different types of challenges, but also different types of triumphs. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Madeleine?
Um, I think there were a number of challenges, which I think Lei had kind of talked about a little bit in terms of filmmaking not necessarily being a very sustainable career to begin with. And so, with my parents, they were very much, I grew up very poor and working class. And so, going into the arts was not even necessarily something that was feasible. And at that time in Singapore, there was not any higher institution like university or colleges that even offered filmmaking as a course, which is why I had to wait until I came to the United States. And so when I enrolled at San Francisco State, I was writing this script, and the film I wanted to make was, I was in San Francisco, I was in the US. I had been undocumented for the first 2-3 years. And, there was this really strong sense of longing for home, right, which I had left because the Singapore government had started arresting citizens and calling them dissidents. And, by the second round of arrests, it had gotten really close to me. And that was the reason I left, was because of the underground LGBTQ organizing that I've been doing, which was illegal, of course. This was in 1987 in Singapore. And so I left, I came here. And so the idea was to create a documentary about 3 Singaporean queer women who are immigrants to the United States, and basically telling our story, right? It's really a story about belonging and home, and, parents being out to them and how they're dealing with it. And also, being in a new country, and how do you maintain your culture and your traditions and things like that. And so I wrote this script and I turned it in for my class, and I got a B from the professor, actually. And the reason he gave me a B was he didn't get it. He didn't understand it. And he was like, go talk to a woman instructor. And I'm like, really? You didn't get it, but you were going to give me a B? Anyways, so that was from the very beginning. It was sort of this people not really understanding what the story was about, and then obviously judging it, right? But I completed that film, and I think I was, and this was shot on 16mm film. I was editing on 6-plate, editing in 16mm, and it takes forever. If you've ever worked in film, it takes 20 minutes to assemble your shot. You play it, it's like, it doesn't work. It takes 10 minutes to put it away. This is long. This is even before VHS editing. VHS editing was considered such an upgrade from film editing. This is all pre-nonlinear days. And so I was sitting in the dark editing, and I really wanted this film to screen in Singapore, right? And it touched upon racism in Singapore, which is a big taboo. It touched upon queer sexuality in Singapore, which is also a big taboo. And so I remember sitting with this one cut, this one edit, and I was going back and forth in my head over this edit because I really wanted to weave this, one of my interviewees saying, you know, they experience racism and homophobia in Singapore, right? And I wanted to, you know, screen, I wanted to cut that with National Day footage, and Singapore National Day footage with the president and the, you know, the military marching by and, you know, flag waving and all of that. And I knew if I did that, that there was very, very low chances that my film was going to screen in Singapore. And so I was, you know, I went on to other pieces, but, you know, I was really battling with that for that one edit for 2 weeks. And finally, I came to the decision that, you know what, this is my film. I'm not going to self-censor, you know, in the hopes that I, you know, if I changed it, that it might screen in Singapore. And what if I made the change and it still didn't screen in Singapore? And then, you know, like, where would I be, right? And so I decided to go ahead and you know, flow with my creative instinct, which I was very glad about. And you know, the film won a couple of awards, which was very gratifying. It won the National Educational Media Network, the Bronze Apple back then. And it won a couple of other awards. And then it got banned in Singapore. And I was very sad. I was very disappointed. I was very angry, actually, because the Singapore government, the Singapore International Film Festival, which is run by the government, came to me and said, you know, we would like to screen your film. I'm like, okay, you should check with your censorship board. And then they checked with the censorship board, and the censorship board sat on the film until after the film festival was over, and then sent a fax with a stamp to say this film is banned. So that was in 1998. In 1999, we tried to lift the ban again. And again, it was like, no, they would not budge on it. And then last fall in October, they wanted to screen the film in Singapore again. So they came to me and they said, we would like to screen your film. You know, it's a historic, you know, it's like it's historical. I was like, sure, okay. You know, like, what do we need to make happen? So they actually got the government to lift the ban for one exception, to lift the ban for this one screening, and the ban is back. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you know, it was definitely one of those challenges. I mean, the film is 24 years old today. It'll be the 25th anniversary next year. You know, we are living in an age of like YouTube and, you know, Vimeo and Facebook. And, you know, if we wanted to share the film, people in Singapore could watch it. You know, I don't really understand the purpose of banning films anymore in this day and age in terms of technology. So anyhow, that was one of my memorable moments.
That's wild. I want to see this film, Madeleine.
Same.
I know, I think we all want to watch this film. And Madeleine, I think you pointed out, you know, so many different challenges as early filmmaker, as a filmmaker part of the queer community, as a queer diaspora filmmaker. I think there are just so many challenges that, you know, as a filmmaker, as a young filmmaker, I feel grateful for your earlier work. And also, I think that's not to the same level or extent, but I think just a lot of queer and trans people of color filmmakers are also facing, the point about self-censorship, the point about, like whether we should just compromise or not. So I think, it's just really great to hear your story. And I think I just got a question. What's the film called?
Oh, so the title of the film is called Sambal Belacan in San Francisco.
And I would love to, I don't know, maybe discuss another opportunity to screen your film here. I mean, sure, in Singapore, there will be more challenges, but how about you, Lei? What were some of the challenges you've had, or some of the triumphs, or both, that you've had in the industry?
I think I have like those two aspects of like as a sound person, which is like a complete monster, and then as a filmmaker, navigating, creating my own films. I resonate with Madeleine a lot about like creating stories that for me makes so much sense because I live in this diaspora and it's so many other life and so many intersections. And showing that to my white professors and they're like, what is this? Being like, this like just centering in like grammar or like centering in how I wrote something. And I'm like, well, what about the whole humanity of it? I think that's one of my challenges as a filmmaker. As a sound person, is a historically white cis men dominated industry and especially a space. And like 3 years ago, I started 5 years ago and I didn't look like this, like I need to now recognize my quote unquote male passing privileges in spaces. But 3 years ago, people would approach me and be like, what is a sound man? Because like how in the world this person that looks like me can be in these spaces, taking so much spaces as a head of the department. I think that's being like one of the biggest and hardest spaces to navigate, because also in order to establish myself as a production sound mixer, I had to I have to put a lot of sacrifice in like working gigs that were like underpaid, working really long hours, working things that didn't gratify me, but I need the credit, so I need the money to be able to like fund something else or like to be able to eat and pay rent, because that's the reality of it. I think one of the achievements that I have had is like this, right? Like being able to like now open a platform for people like me and like, and I'm talking about like black trans people in the diaspora, black trans people that want to work in the tech industry in film, which like we have seen changes in front of the camera, but crew is still seeing the same. We still have the same inequalities still behind the camera. And I think definitely one of the achievements is like now I'm the head of the department and people are like, I don't have to get every gig. Like the fact that I can think about my mental health and my physical health before getting things is already an achievement. Like the fact that I don't have to work those long hours, I think that's one of the biggest achievements too.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think, like really intersections are of, like identities and, itself, like we're already, facing so many different layers of challenges intersecting. And, on top of that, if that's directly influencing, affecting my career, that's like, just being, just facing that is just, it's like such an, I don't want to even say challenge. I think that is just like a really hard moment for everyone. And I'm glad that you are now be able to, find the balance and, what you want to do and what you can do. So I'm really happy for you. And thank you for sharing that. Before I open up for the audience, I just want to ask you, do you have any other advice to fellow QTPOC filmmakers? Maybe we could go the other way around. Do you want to start, Lei?
Okay, yeah, I can do. I think for me, it's really imperative to say that what we start talking about at the beginning of like, there is not only one way into filmmaking, and there is many spaces that we need to change in order to change the whole industry. We don't just need directors, we need editors, we need PAs, we need everything in the ladder. And for more people like us to be in there and change that, we all have to like work in there. And also, yeah, that like most of the things don't have to just like be one way or another. Like there's many ways to get into it. For people, like your story matters, and there are stories that cannot be told by anyone else but the person that is living them. Like, and it's really important to hear those stories from the people that live in those intersections.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your comment. Maybe we can go with you, Madeleine.
Sure. Are we talking about advice?
Yeah, just any advice, tips for fellow QTPOC filmmakers.
I think there's a little bit more awareness now, particularly around BIPOC filmmakers and BIPOC film organizations. I think there are some really great ones like Firelight Media that's really focusing work on BIPOC filmmakers. And so I would say check out and take advantage of all of the resources that are available now. They were definitely not available during my time at all, not even 10 years ago. So definitely check those out, check out panels. It's a really great way to connect with the different filmmakers that might end up on Q&As, at film festivals or different, like Doc NYU, NYC, or AFI Docs, or any of those, or and connect. So I think it's, people are a lot more open to connecting via virtually because of the pandemic. So really taking advantage of that. Yeah, and like Lay said, our stories are really, really important. I would not trust anyone else to tell them. We know those stories best, and we should be the ones telling them. We should be the ones, making those creative decisions behind the camera, casting our people in front of the camera. So just, if you are drawn to something, just go, go do it.
Thank you so much for that comment. And I think that's really like the essence of this panel, and that's really the at the core of Prideful's mission too, just to be able to celebrate our own stories and share our own stories and really support the filmmakers who are telling their own stories that we can relate to. So thank you for your advice. Mary, do you want to go next?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely echo what Lay and Madeleine were saying. And I would add on top of that whatever you're passionate about, try not to focus too hard on whether or not you can make a large enough income when you're starting out. Of course, you gotta find a way to survive, so that's important, but to not disregard a dream because of the fact that you may not be making a lot of money to start with, because the money will come if you dedicate your time and your energy, and you build up your skills and you work really hard towards something. You will eventually get to a point where you can make a living at it. And I think there's a lot of fear around filmmaking and arts and stuff like that with financial security, and I just really want to encourage people to follow their dreams, because it is very possible. And someone's making movies out there getting paid to do it. Why can't it be you? And if you don't see the space created for you, you can create the space for yourself and for your community and your people, and build each other up. And when one person succeeds in your community, you all raise and rise with them. And so just go for it, create that space, create those opportunities for yourself, and believe in yourself. You got to believe in yourself more than anyone else will.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's really, all the challenges that every aspiring filmmaker has, because it's a real question whether you can make money. The filmmaking is, can we live with filmmaking? And I think that's a really hopeful to hear from you, that, it is possible. There are so many horror stories out there about filmmaking, and it's really inspiring to hear that. I'm getting some questions. The first question I have is, should I go to film school to start filmmaking?
Oh, I'll jump in on that. So I am for filmmaking, I went to acting school. I was trained as an actor, but for filmmaking, writing and directing, up until this year, I had not gone to film school. But what I did was I went on sets even as like a background extra, and I observed and learned and asked questions. So it's not necessary. It's harder if you don't, but you can start making films with your phone, with your friends. Practice telling a story in a intriguing way without fancy gear, fancy crews and actors. Like, you can start filmmaking if you have any way to record a film. You can start filmmaking without training. If you have the access to education, I highly recommend it, because you will then be getting a lot of tools that will help you get further faster. But it's not necessary. You can self teach pretty much everything on the internet these days too. If you have access to a library or Wi-Fi, read books, watch YouTube tutorials. There's so many great, like No Film School online. That's literally what's called, No Film School. And they teach you all about everything in filmmaking. So you can do it without film school. If you can get to film school, go for it. Do it. It's so fun and you learn so much, but not necessary. Not at all. That's my opinion.
Can I just add to that? Just to say that I had mentioned, Firelight Media earlier, and just to mention QUACMAP, Queer Women of Color Media Arts Project, which is the organization that I founded. We offer filmmaking training free of charge to our queer and trans people of color communities. And we are based in San Francisco, so most of our training occurs here in the Bay Area, but we do travel with our workshop. And, we've taken our workshop on the road before throughout the United States. And it obviously depends on funding. We receive funding to do the workshop internationally. So we actually took it to Mexico and taught it in Spanish. So, however you get your education and your training, whether it's like Mary said, through tutorials on YouTube, or talking to friends, or networking, or, going through a formal program, or taking training programs that might be available at, some of the film organizations that may be available around you.
Yeah, thank you for the tip, both Mary and Madeleine. Just wanted to share that Madeleine's organization is called QUACMAP, QWOCMAP. If Julie or Isaiah, if you can share in the chat, that would be great. Do you want to add anything, Lei?
I'm just agree. I also think I went all the way to get a master's degree in film, but I think also this institution had no name for especially queer, Black people of color, so it is hard to go through that process and not kill your creative instincts in a way. So I will say these organizations, thank you so much, Madeleine, for having those organizations that get free of charge, and are platforms where you can form yourself more creatively than the technical aspects that are just gonna be washed out or whitewashed out from you. I don't think you need film school, especially the fancy kinds. I went all into the public system and we are here. So it's I think it's not necessary.
Thank you for adding that, Lei. And again, I think we're all really grateful for your work, Madeleine. And also there are so many other organizations in your local area, nationwide, virtual. So yeah, there are definitely resources out there. We have 2 more questions and we don't have a lot of time, but I would really love to address all the questions. I have a question from Chinju. As a QTPOC filmmaker, do you want to continue making QTPOC films more, or do you not want to limit yourself to it?
I'm going to go for this one. I don't think telling queer stories limit myself, because it's such a part of my identity that I don't see this as a limiter. It's like I can be a socialist and a queer. So it's like I think it's good to like understand the intersection of our life. It's not just like we are not a monolith. So we can explore queer stories for so many ways that I think like yes, definitely I want to continue telling queer stories because it's a big part of my identity and because we also encompass so many things that I want to show all that full spectrum of it.
Yeah, I definitely want to keep telling stories that center queer and BIPOC characters. It's like just sort of something that comes naturally to my writing and directing. And I'm such a big advocate for inclusion in film and TV that at this point in time, I feel like I am kind of one of the loudest voices in many of the rooms I'm getting into, being like, where's your people of color? Where's your LGBTQ2IA people? Like, and so right now that is a huge focus for me because I think it's necessary at this point in history. It may not always be that way, but it's also the stories that I'm most drawn to and most want to watch and get the most fulfillment out of. So yeah, I also don't feel it's limiting. It's just something that's very something near and dear to my heart. So I will continue to do that for sure.
Yeah, and just to echo Leigh and Mary, I agree. I don't see it as a limitation. I do know that the film industry pigeonholes us, and they like to say, that's a, chick flick, or that's a, whatever, and I really think that the work that needs to be done here is that they need to change their categories, right? I think that our stories are important. They are intersectional in terms of, like if you are dealing with the immigration story, like my film Samba Balachan in San Francisco, it deals with immigration and it deals with being queer and it deals with, family. And so it's, for me, that is actually an expansion and not a limitation, right? I think very often, people think that, oh, this community, if you're queers and you're of color, it's like a niche within a niche. And I think that, well, we actually, it's sort of like if you lift us up, everyone around us gets lifted up as well, right? And all our voices get amplified. So yeah, so that is my intention, is to actually continue making stories about our queer and of color communities, because there's not enough. I am starved for these stories. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, I'm starved for these stories. So I think there is a great need for more of our stories, and we have to make up for all those many years where there was a lack of. So bring them on, we need them.
Yeah, I think I can't agree more with all of you. I think, we are always looking for more of our stories, queer and queer of color stories. So, thank you all so much for, doing your work and also, joining us in this, great conversation. It's 8:47 and I really feel bad that I really wish there was more time. But thank you so much for coming out tonight. Again, this event is recorded and it will be available to the public. Thank you, Mary, Leigh, Madeleine, for coming out. Thank you for everyone who's watching it alive. And there are more films and Q&A scheduled. So please check out our website, prideful.org. And I'll say good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you. Bye, Chica.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good night.
Thank you for having me. It was great.